Hey everyone, David here. Welcome back. Another episode for my continuing YouTube series on the game Advanced Squad Leader. And today we're going to go into Chapter D for the vehicles, talk about vehicular movement. And in particular, we're going to use the tracked AFE you see in front of you here. This is a small little model. It goes along with the deluxe ASL map I'm going to use so it can highlight some of the stuff that can make or break the difference in how you play the game. Also, you'll notice I have one of the original AFE cards here. And basically, it came out with the old game, Streets of Fire, followed by Hedgerow Hell, and you can get all sorts of stuff. Basically, it's the Chapter H notes laid out. So if you're playing with miniatures, you have the information here. It's kind of interesting. It has all the stuff, the front armor, side armor, exactly what it is. And you don't have to squint your eyes if you're an old man like me. So without further ado, let's go into the vehicle movement for Advanced Squad Leader. So one thing to note about vehicles is, unlike the smaller personnel counters, vehicles must be facing the vertex of a hex, just like the ordnance vehicles will have to do. The ordnance guns and stuff like that. Most of them do. So for example, you can see here, he's pointing at there, and so is his turret. If his turret wanted to be off to one side or another, it would have to also point at a vertex as well. I try to get my fat, fumbly fingers here to work, and there we go. You can see that his turret covered arc is down through here, and his vehicle covered arc is through here. Next, remember that vehicles use movement points and not movement factors. This differs from infantry. And it's more than just a name. There is some particular differences, and I'll get into that. Okay, as we move forward, we can see that the Panther is sitting here in this city, facing the vehicle covered arc and turret covered arc is the same, covering off of I2 and H2 as he sits in hex H1. Unlike personnel counters, infantry, etc., you don't just simply, expend a movement factor to move into a point. As stated, they use movement points. First thing they have to do is they have to start up. Some vehicles have red movement points, as I alluded to before, and that may cause you to roll 2 dice to see if there's any adverse effects. We'll assume, for the sake of argument, throughout this video that they've passed all that stuff. So he's not under motion, and he has to spend 1 movement point to start up. Conversely, if it's moving, and you want to stop, you have to spend a point to stop. Now, in this case, the Panzer Kampfwagen 5G, the Panther, this one has a movement point allowance of 15. We'll assume that he starts for 1, and then you carry on counting. If you expend movement points, then you are basically committed to expending them all. And I'll show you what that means and how it can adversely affect your vehicle next. As we look ahead, we see here in this brush hex in front of us a T-34-85 with 85 millimeter long main gun. It is incapable of penetrating the front hull armor of the Panther. That said, he can draw for special ammo. He could get his APCR, in which case that could increase his chances of knocking out the Panther, although not by much. Still needs a pretty good shot. That said, let's see what happens, the implication of your movement point expenditure in the next phase as a Panther comes around the corner. And here's the in-game situation. Far down the road from us here, we have ourselves the T-34-85 in the brush facing this direction. It's quite obvious he has line of sight to this point here, and probably not to this one. For the sake of argument, we're going to say he doesn't. And I think it's quite obvious that he doesn't. 1, 2, 1, 2, cuts through there. That's right. Okay. Line of sight passes through right about here. So, the Panther is sitting there and it hasn't moved yet. We've already explained that he has a total of 15 movement points. He starts up for 1, rolls 2 dice, rolls a 7, and he's fine. So he has 14 movement points left. The aim for the Panther is to get to this hex here and then get a frontal shot against the T-34-85. All things being equal, there's no other enemy around and they sort of know each other. They're not concealed, nothing like that. Okay, starts for 1, moves here for 2, and now the T-34-85 sees him for 1 movement point. The Panther decides to stop for 3, and that ends his movement. So you think, well, he's seen him for 2 movement points. But that's not it. If they stop and they're not using anymore his the tank, in this case the Panther, is assumed to have expended all remaining movement points in that hex. So the novice player realizes that his mistake, and the T-34-85 can take a shot. It's a large target, right? So there's a -1 to the hit there. He's moving. That's a +2. Maybe he's buttoned up. I don't know. Anyway, let's go back for a moment. Go to here. Starts up for 1, rolls a 3. His engine's fine. He decides to not expend 1 movement point, but you can expend more. In this case, he knows he needs to stop on 15. It'll take him 14 to go in there, so he decides to start for 13. Wow, starting, and expends 13 movement points in there. Nobody else sees him, nobody else shoots. Moves up for 14. T-34-85 decides not to shoot, and he stops for 15. If the T-34-85 shoots now, then he's lost his chance to, he's going to face an adverse phase. He's going to have to wait until the defensive fire phase in order to shoot. So in this case, the T-34-85 waits until the defensive fire phase, and then, he'll maybe have to face the adverse effects of waiting so long. Let's go on to some other aspects of the movements. We're now going to focus on the T-34-85 and his options of how to get out of this situation where he has a Panther facing him to the front. Now, all things being equal, we'll assume that both vehicles are buttoned up. Neither has acquired the other, and they see each other. It's the beginning of the T-34-85's movement phase. We know that it's going to cost points for him to start up, and we know that the Panther can shoot at him before he does that. We'll get into the mechanics of fire later. Basically, the T-34-85 wants to get out of dodge as fast as possible. In this case, he's going to start up, but in reverse movement, I should say. This has to be announced by the player at the beginning. Not a problem. He expends 1 to start. The Panther can shoot if he wants to, but for whatever reason, we're going to say he doesn't shoot. And now the T-34-85 will move backwards. It has to be one of the 2 hexes behind him in order to move into. There's no hex here. It's the end of the universe. Nothing there. So he has to go to this hex. 1 to start. 4 to move back. It costs 4 times your movement allowance to go back. Whatever the movement point costs to enter, it is quadrupled. If you were to go into a brush hex, it would cost him 8. Went into open ground, it cost him 4. The T-34-85 decides to stop. He's now out of line of sight. He's at 6. Starts up for 7. It's going to decide to come around to the other side. Vehicle covered arc change for 8. Enter the brush hex. He's going to expend for 10. He's going to covered arc change for 11. And for 12, and stop for 13, and delay out to 16. In this case, what the T-34-85 has done is got behind the wall, and it's hoping that wall advantage against this hex here if the Panther decides to come up. Again, that's more for a combat for later, but here at least you can see that the reverse movement is an option for vehicles, and it costs 4 times the movement point allowance to enter the hex behind you. Also, you must announce that you're advancing into reverse motion. The last point we're going to talk about here is vehicle bypass movement. In order to be able to bypass buildings or woods, those are the only 2 terrain features you can bypass. In ASL, you have to be able to lay the counter down between the obstacle and the hex side. There has to be room. In Deluxe ASL, I checked the rules. There was nothing there that said one thing or the other, so just go with those rules. unless otherwise stated. Concentrate on what the rules allow. Looks like in deluxe ASL we have more ability to do so. So the vehicle bypass movement is per hex side, unlike for the infantry where you can go 2 of them for the count of 1. Also, it's a lot slower. It's double the cost to go whatever the terrain is that you're going through. And also you have to keep in mind you have to spend a point to change your covered arc. I will demonstrate this now. So, Panther here is trying to get to the flank of the T-3485, decides to go through the buildings. I mentioned that it is double, so he's going to start up for 1. He's going to enter the bypass here for 2 more, for a total of 3. He wants to keep going this direction. Pivot for 4, 5, 6. Pivot for 7, 8, 9. Pivot for 10, 11, 12. And he decides to keep going for 13, coming up alongside the T-3485. So again, 2 points, double whatever the cost of the other terrain is that you're bypassing. Has to be buildings or woods. You cannot bypass brush, grain, lumber yards, orchards, anything else. Buildings or woods only. It costs double. And also remember that your covered arc must change as you're going along. So it is quite slow. You saw here it took him up to 13 or so. Start from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 to get there. If he just came down the road, it would 1, 2, 3, 4 in his front. A lot faster. So it does slow you down, but it does allow a vehicle to maneuver in between buildings. Okay, that's all I'm going to cover for movement in ASL right now. Hopefully I've covered off enough to get you started getting through Chapter D, Part 2. Stay focused, because next time I want to get into some of the vehicle combat and how some of the intricacies of vehicle combat, where the more experienced player will often have an advantage over the inexperienced player and take advantage of various dice roll modifiers, etc. Okay, thanks for watching. If you like the video, please subscribe, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.